You know the universe might actually notice you. Not your work, not your username, but the quiet, private moods you never say out loud. It really makes you wonder. If something out there could feel anything at all, what would it choose to pay attention to? Stars exploding, or one human sitting awake at 3 a.m., feeling very small and very alive. In this story, that's exactly what starts to happen. High in the Chilean Andes, in a quiet observatory above the sleeping Earth, a scientist named Dorian Hale is watching what should be random data streams from neutrino tanks and gravity detectors. And right as a thought hits them, do any of us matter? The background noise of the universe moves. The night had grown very still by the time the noise began to move. Outside the observatory, the Andes lay under cold, thin air, like dark islands rising from a silver sea of clouds. Stars hung above in heavy clusters. They were bright and hard and very far away. Inside, under soft lights and steady hums, Dorian Hale sat alone, watching numbers slide across quiet screens. Dorian liked these hours. The world below slept. The cities and storms and arguments were all somewhere else. Up here, the air felt clean and empty. The work felt clear. Neutrinos drifted through the rock. Gravity waves brushed past the detectors. Almost nothing changed. Almost nothing ever changed. Almost. Sometimes, in very quiet moments, when Dorian's thoughts grew strong and full, the background noise of the universe seemed to lean just a little toward them. Dorian never said that part aloud. The observatory sat high in the Chilean Andes. Above most of the air and dust, it was a mix of tunnels, domes, and long, low halls full of metal beams and quiet machines. Below ground, tanks full of clear liquid watched for tiny flashes from neutrinos. Above ground, long arms of metal and lasers listened for tiny changes in gravity itself. People came and went in shifts, but the night belonged to Dorian. Dorian walked slowly through the main lab. Bootsteps soft on the floor. The neutrino detectors all around were huge silent giants. They did not look exciting. Pipes, cables, smooth walls, simple lights. The magic was inside, in how still everything had to be. The tanks waited for ghost-like particles that passed through mountains and planets, as if they were not there. Once in a long while, a neutrino hit an atom in the tank and made a soft flash of light. Sensors picked it up. Computers logged it. The gravitational detectors were even more shy. 2 long tunnels crossed underground at right angles, each filled with a thin beam of light that bounced between mirrors. If a gravity wave passed by, it would stretch space in one direction and squeeze it in another, just a tiny bit. The beams would feel the change. The pattern of light at the ends would shift. Sensors would record it. Most of the time, nothing much happened. Just small jitters of the ground, the slow pull of the moon, the breathing of the earth. Dorian liked that. The machines were so careful, so patient. They felt the faintest touch of the universe. That night, Dorian sat at a main console, watching the live feeds. Outside, The wind was strong against the outer walls, but in here everything stayed still. There was the neutrino feed, full of random small events. There was the gravity data, a constant slow shake of tiny changes. Years of training had taught Dorian how that normal noise should look. They were also good at being alone with thoughts. They rubbed their eyes and leaned back, a slow wonder. Did any of this matter? Did human life, this small and brief, mark the universe in any lasting way? Stars burned for billions of years. Dark matter held galaxies together. Humans cried, loved, grew old, and vanished. Sometimes it felt like the cosmos hardly noticed. They reached forward and called up an old data set. Neutrino, bursts from a supernova in a nearby dwarf galaxy. The date in the corner of the main display said July 17th, 2285. Their 35th birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. They had celebrated by staying for the extra night shift, watching a quiet meteor stream slide over the Andes. A few co-workers had sent short messages. Their sister had sent a recording from a floating city over the Pacific, with laughing children in the background. After that, it was silent again. Dorian did not mind. Still, there was a soft ache inside that did not quite leave. Beautiful, tight peaks in the noise. A star had died there, long before humans had even learned to write. The waves of its death had washed through the solar system, through this planet, through this mountain, through Dorian's body. "Did you care?" Dorian asked softly, not really meaning to say it out loud. They were not sure who they were speaking to. The dead star, the universe, themselves. A long, slow sigh left their lungs. Inside their chest, something felt raw and bright, like a small, hurting light. Their mind filled with old memories. Their mother smiling in a tiny kitchen. Their father holding a broken sensor together with frozen fingers on an icy roof. A class in childhood, staring at a school picture of the Milky Way, feeling both amazed and very, very small. As the feelings climbed and settled, the noise on the screen shifted. At first Dorian did not see it. The change was too smooth, too soft. The neutrino background dipped just a bit, then made a faint curve upward. The gravity data showed a tiny, gentle arch, like a slow breath in still air. Small patterns crossed the screen, then curved back again, almost like they were moving around something. Dorian's hand froze above the keyboard. They knew these instruments. The detectors did not react to moods. They only cared about particles and space-time. If there was a shift, it had a cause. A passing mass. A machine error. A glitch in software. Dorian marked the timestamp. They pulled up the last 10 minutes of data. Then the next 10. The pattern repeated. Faint but real. When they had felt that sharp ache, that question, the background noise had bent. It was as if some unseen field had leaned around them. That did not make sense. Dorian checked for local causes. They pulled up logs. No trucks nearby. No small quakes. No system tests. Air pressure was steady. Temperature stable. The local test mass in the gravity lab had not moved. There were no power spikes. The curves still sat on the screen. Soft arcs. Faint, but not random. Dorian played the data. Again, while the lines slid across the display, they thought back to their own feeling a few minutes earlier. Loneliness, yes. A deep wish to be seen. A strong, sudden need not to be. Just noise in a huge, cold universe. The shapes lined up with those seconds. It was too close to be chance. At least Dorian's tired mind said so. They gave a short, uneasy laugh. "You're seeing faces in clouds," they muttered. "Stop it." Still, their hands moved to save the sample. They tagged the segment with a neutral label and sent it into the archive. Then they called up a live view again and sat very still. All right, they thought. If this is real, do it again. They felt foolish. They closed their eyes and tried to call up a different, strong feeling. Gratitude, this time. Warm memories. Their mother teaching them how to fix an old radio. Their first clear view of Saturn's rings through a small orbital telescope. A friend they had once loved very much, who had moved to the moons of Jupiter years ago. For a moment, heat filled their chest, not painful now, but full and wide. A quiet joy spread through their ribs. The line on the gravity feed dipped and made a new shape. Not an arch this time, but a gentle S-curve, very small, like a soft twist in the steady background. The neutrino noise followed with a tiny paired bend. Dorian's eyes flew open. Their heart pounded. Okay, that's odd. They saved the data again, marked it, then forced themselves to stand up. They needed another set of eyes. Even if they looked foolish, it was better than sitting here alone thinking the sky had feelings. In the side office, they opened a link to Dr. Mariela Ortiz, the lead scientist for the local site. It was late, but Ortiz was often awake. Her head and shoulders appeared above the desk. Her hair was messy, her eyes sharp, even at this hour. "Dorian," she said, "everything okay?" "I think so," Dorian said. "I just picked up something odd. Twice, in both neutrino and gravity channels. It seems tied to times when someone is inside the main lab." Ortiz frowned, more curious than worried. "Instrument error, maybe. But I checked the logs. No local sources. No quakes. No tests. The pattern is smooth, and it repeats." "Send it," she said. Dorian did. Ortiz watched in silence as the curves played out. She leaned closer, eyes scanning. Her fingers tapped a rhythm on her desk. "It is small, but real." She said at last. "Could be some slow drift in calibration. Could be a software artifact. Could be you breathing on something. There was also a similar thing last week," Dorian said. "I did not save it then, because I thought it was nonsense. It also happened while I was alone in the main lab." Ortiz raised an eyebrow. "You think the detectors, like your company?" "I think something changes when people are nearby, or when certain states are present." "States?" Ortiz asked. Strong moods, Dorian said. Cheeks growing hot. Look, I know how that sounds. I just know the timing lines up. Maybe the micro movements of the body change the local mass. Maybe heart rate changes gravity a bit. Ortiz held up a hand. It is good you notice strange things. Stings. That is how science moves forward. But you know we have to be careful around human pattern seeking. We see shapes in clouds, faces in rocks, messages in noise. I know, Dorian said softly. I know. Log every event like this for the next month. Ortiz said, set the systems to mark when a human is in the main lab. I will loop in the teams on the moon and in orbit. If they see something similar, then we have a reason to dig deeper. Okay, Dorian said, a little relieved. And get some sleep now and then, Ortiz added, her voice more gentle. Night shifts can make anything look alive. Her image faded. Dorian stood alone again, in the quiet lab. They returned to the main room and looked around. The tanks and tunnels kept still. The machines went on, watching the invisible streams that passed through earth and sky. Are you there? Dorian asked them softly, not sure who or what they meant. The universe, the noise, the strange curves. Or am I just tired? There was no sound, but the low hum of the cooling systems. The data lines moved on, full of random spikes and soft jitters. For the rest of the night, nothing more unusual happened. Days passed. Other nights came. Dorian did as Ortiz had asked. They logged every event with any hint of that smooth, bending pattern. They marked when people entered and left the main lab. They slept more during the day, but not much more. 2 weeks later, Ortiz called them again. This may surprise you, she said. You are not alone. She sent a shared packet. It held datasets from the Mare Tranquillitatis neutrino station on the moon and from the Santiago orbital gravitational array. The curves were different in size, but the shapes were there. Small, organized bends in the background noise. Each one matched times when people had been alone or in small groups inside the main labs. They also thought it was random at first, Ortiz said. But when I asked them to tag human presence, the patterns became clear. So it's not just this site, Dorian said, feeling their hearts beat up again. No, Ortiz said quietly. It is global and not random. We do not yet know what it means, but you were the first to say it out loud. She paused, looking at Dorian across the light and distance between them. Keep watching, she said. Something is paying attention to us or reacting to us. The question is how. The link closed. The lab seemed even more silent than before. Dorian sat down in the dark, screens dimmed to spare their eyes, and listened to the noise of the universe. It was no longer just noise. It had started to move, gently when humans stood near and felt certain ways. The change was still small. Most people on Earth did not know about it yet. The stars outside still looked the same. But somewhere deep in the data, the universe had taken a tiny step toward them. Dorian did not know yet that this small step was the start of a new kind of first contact. They only knew that, for the first time in their life, their private feelings might be touching something vast and unseen. The thought made the ache in their chest soften. It felt like a quiet hand had rested, very gently, on their shoulder. Word of the strange patterns spread slowly, at first only inside trusted science channels. Observatories compared notes over secure links. The Mare Tranquillitatis station on the Moon, the orbital arrays around Earth and Mars, deep underground labs in Europe and Asia, a neutrino sphere under the ice of Antarctica. All of them had seen small, organized bends in the background noise. All of them, once they checked, found the same thing. The bends matched human presence and human moods. The first big step came from a data analyst named He Ping on the orbital array above Earth. He Ping was quiet, stubborn, and very good at finding hidden shapes in large, messy sets of numbers. He took weeks of data and lined up each odd curve with logs of who was in which room at what time. Then he went a step further. He asked people on the array to keep short private notes about how they had felt during their shifts. Sad, calm, tense, happy, lonely, focused, relaxed. They rated each feeling simply with rough scores. When he laid the curves over the mood notes, the match was shocking. Sharp, restless moods tended to show as tense zigzags in the gravitational data. Deep, steady sadness made long, low arcs. Moments of joy made softer S-shapes with tiny waves at the edges. The neutrino noise bent with the same patterns, but in its own style, like a faint twin drawing. He Ping shared his results with the small circle of observatory leads. There was a long, heavy silence in the virtual room. Ortiz spoke first. "We must assume this is a mistake," she said. "Some way we fed human bias into the data. A feedback from our own instruments. A correlation that only looks meaningful." He Ping nodded. "That was my first thought," he said. "So I tried something else." We had a volunteer session, controlled. He showed them the plan. 10 people, 10 separate rooms, all shielded and far from the main equipment. Each person sat alone for an hour. They were given a simple audio track that guided them through different feelings in a fixed order: calm, sadness, gratitude, gentle fear, curiosity, joy, regret, love. Their heart rates, breathing, and brain waves were recorded. None of them could see the detector data. Those no toward. None of them could see the detector data. No one in the main lab was told the order of moods. The detector logs were sealed until the session ended. When He Ping overlaid the final mood maps on the detector curves, the fit was clear as day. "It is not perfect," he said. "Humans are messy. People drift. But even with that, there is a strong match. Some moods produce very similar bends in the noise, even across different people." Ortiz rubbed her forehead. "So the detectors are reacting to human emotion itself. They are reacting to something that lines up with emotion," He Ping said. "Maybe the body fields, maybe some hidden signal from the brain." but the effect size is too large for normal body mass changes. This feels like a tension. From outside, the next months became a quiet global effort to test that idea. This time, they worked with more care. On Earth, in Chile, Dorian joined the first local controlled sessions. They sat in a small room near, but not inside, the main lab. The room had soft walls and a single chair. Sensors watched their heart rate, breathing and brain activity. A simple track spoke in a calm voice, asking them to bring up certain memories and moods. "Remember a time you felt truly safe," the voice said. "Hold that feeling in your chest. Do not rush. Just rest inside it." Dorian let their mind drift back, their mother's arms after a nightmare, the way the mountains looked at dawn when they first arrived at the observatory years ago. Pink light on snow, the whole world below still dark and sleeping. Warmth spread across their ribs, their muscles loosened, their breath slowed. Far above and below, the detectors watched. In another session, the track asked for sadness. Dorian thought of losses, missed chances, a friend they had hurt by pulling away. The empty space where their parents should have been in later years. The feeling was heavy, like a soft stone in the stomach. Again, the detectors watched. Days later, Ortiz called Dorian into the main hall. On the main display, she had layered Dorian's mood map over the gravitational and neutrino data. "Look," she said. Dorian stared. During the safe memory, the gravity background had formed a wide, gentle rise and fall. It was smooth, with faint, repeating bumps at the edges, like a soft pattern of breathing. The neutrino noise had dipped, then held in a shallow bowl, as if bracing gently around something during the sadness block. The patterns changed. The gravity line sagged lower and stayed there, then rose very slowly, like a long sigh. The neutrino noise grew more jagged, but still carried a shape that matched the timing. "This seems like emotional topography," Ortiz said, "like the world's invisible fields are making a map of how you felt in time." Dorian's mouth felt dry. "Is it the same with other people?" Ortiz nodded. "The basic shapes repeat. Safeness is one kind of pattern. Joy has another. Regret, another. The details change between people, but the core shapes stay very similar." Dorian swallowed. "And this did not happen when the rooms were empty?" "No," Ortiz said. "The background stayed normal. Random. Only when a human sat there and went through guided states did the noise change like this." Across the solar system, other teams saw the same thing. On the moon, the buried detectors under dusty rock bent in sync with moods of people in small halls. Above, around Mars, orbital gravity arrays shifted gently as colonists in quiet cabins thought through old stories of home and far-off oceans. In the cold Antarctic lab, deep below blue ice, neutrino tanks curved their noise when a single researcher, wrapped in thick clothes, let their mind move from fear to calm, from isolation to quiet trust. The Galactic Council took notice. Signals flowed in from other species and societies, full of wonder and polite doubt. Many advanced civilizations had their own gravity and neutrino observatories. They checked their logs. At first, they reported nothing strange. Then some tried the same human-style tests. On a world with 3 suns, a long-lived, very stable species sat in meditation chambers, guided through their own mood shifts. Some of them felt emotions much slower and milder than humans. Their detectors showed only tiny, hard-to-read changes. On a giant station near the edge of a nebula, a silicon-based kind of life formed calm thought patterns, while their gravitational scopes watched. Again, the changes were slight and faint. Finally, a mixed test was done. On a quiet lunar base run by the Council near Jupiter, humans and 2 other species sat in separate rooms at the same distance from a shared gravity detector. They all went through the same guided mood plan. All 3 groups made some change in the noise, but the human curves were the strongest, richest, and most organized. Their inner storms and warm tides drew the clearest shapes in the invisible fields. It was He Ping, again, who suggested a bold new model. What if dark matter is not just stuff? He wrote in his shared paper. What if it is a kind of distributed life that can feel patterns in gravity and neutrinos the way we feel light and sound? It may not think as we do. It may not have bodies as we do. But it may enjoy, or at least notice certain kinds of patterns more than others. Human emotions are noisy, rich, and always changing. Perhaps the dark sector finds that interesting. People called it the living dark model. Dark matter was already known to be everywhere, forming huge halos around galaxies, filling the spaces between stars. It did not shine, but its gravity held everything together. It passed through normal matter, almost without touching. In the new model, those same dark particles and fields also carried a kind of awareness, spread out very thin across space. Not a single mind, but a vast network of tiny sensing units working together. A distributed intelligence. It had no eyes, but it could feel how gravity and particles changed. When a planet full of minds began to glow with warm, wild emotional fields, the dark sector could taste that warmth as simple shapes. To test this, scientists focused on a new measure. They called it microgravitational coherence. Instead of looking only for big waves from black holes or neutron stars, they searched for tiny, organized changes in gravity at very small scales. These changes were too gentle to be made by normal matter shifts alone. They found that during strong human emotional states, especially in shared groups, the local gravity field showed more coherence. The noise was less random. Patterns formed and held just a little longer than chance would allow, as if something was smoothing or adjusting the chaos to match a preferred sound. It is like resonance, Ortiz explained to Dorian, standing in front of a plot full of softly curved lines. If you sing a note that matches a glass, the glass vibrates. It does not mean the glass understands the song, but it responds. Here, our emotional patterns may be singing in a key that dark matter likes. It hums with us. Dorian watched the lines of data. It felt strange, but also oddly natural to think that their moods were brushing against a huge, unseen sea around them. Are we sure this is not just our instruments talking to themselves? Dorian asked. We have run hardware tests, Ortiz said. We have swapped out equipment. We have done sessions with robots playing back body signals from recorded humans. The patterns are weaker then. The strongest responses come from live, conscious minds having real feelings in real time. Something out there seems to care about the living part. The word care hung in the air. Dorian felt a quiet joy under their ribs. Their old ache about meaning shifted. If the dark sector was alive, if it could enjoy or at least attend to human warmth, then they were not just noise. They were a bright patch in a much larger field. As months passed, more structured experiments began. Groups of volunteers sat together in large chambers near detectors. They told each other stories from their lives, holding hands or simply sharing the same air. As they spoke, they let themselves feel deeply. Grief, love, relief, hope. The detectors marked each shared wave. The data showed something new. When people felt together, the patterns in gravity and neutrino noise grew more complex and more coherent at the same time. The living dark, if that was what it was, seemed to listen more strongly when human feelings lined up in shared stories. Scientists started to talk about emotional topography as a real field of study. Not just in poetry, but in measurements. They drew simple maps showing how waves of feeling moved through rooms, buildings, towns. They showed how those waves seemed to tug faintly on the dark matter field around them, making small hills and valleys in the invisible sea. The Galactic Council held a calm, careful debate. Some elders from long-lived species said this was all accident, a side effect. Others, more open to surprise, said that if the dark sector responded to emotion like this, it deserved a place at the table of sentient life, even if it could not speak in words. On Earth, Dorian kept working nights at the Chilean observatory. But now, when they sat alone in the lab, they no longer felt quite as alone. The detectors hummed softly. The stars shone outside, and all around, wrapping every star and every person. The dark matter halo of the galaxy might be sensing their thoughts with a gentle, curious touch. Sometimes, when Dorian felt something strong, they would watch the live data and see the tiny bends answer. It was like a shy nod from a friend who could not yet speak. The idea took root among humans. Perhaps their minds were not just small fires under a cold sky. Perhaps they were also bright beacons in a living dark, sending stories out to something vast that had waited a very long time to feel this kind of warmth. The first full briefing to the Galactic Council took place in a slow ring of signals that circled the inner arm of the Milky Way. It took days for messages to pass from system to system, even with the fastest comm lines. In that time, humans on Earth and the Moon gathered their best data into a clear story. Dorian watched parts of the main report from a quiet room near the Chilean lab. The feed showed a shared model of the galaxy, with faint blue clouds marking known dark matter halos. Around each bright star, the dark halo swelled like a soft, invisible sea. Overlaid lines showed where microgravitational coherence had been measured near human settlements. The lines near Earth and the moon were thickest. Ortiz stood in front of a camera in another hall. Her voice reached Dorian. A second later, in summary, she said, "We have strong evidence that the dark sector of our galaxy reacts to human emotional patterns. It responds most clearly to live conscious minds with rich inner states. Other species can cause a reaction, but the effect is weaker and less organized. Our current model says that dark matter may hold a distributed awareness. It may not think in any way we understand, but it notices patterns in gravity and neutrinos. Human emotions, with their fast wings and complex shapes, seem to stand out especially well. The council members appeared as small floating images above the main display. Some were shapes of light from gas beings. Some were solid bodies in many colors and sizes. Some were only symbols for now, because their true form did not show well on human screens. A council elder from a long-lived, slow-thinking species spoke. Its voice was low and even, translated into simple words. "We have watched your kind for 2 centuries. It said, "You move quickly, you feel strongly, you change your minds often. We saw this as a flaw and a danger, but also as a source of art and surprise. Now you say that the dark sector prefers your noise. We do not claim preference yet." Ortiz said, "We only know that our patterns make stronger resonance. Human minds seem to shine more brightly to the dark field. We think this is because our inner stories move fast and vary a lot. The dark sector gets more information from us per unit of time." Another council voice joined in, this one sharp and curious. "You mean that your species is like a bright, flickering light in a room that was mostly dim? Other species are steady lamps. You are a storm of colors. The dark matter reacts more to your storm." "Yes," Ortiz said. "That is a good image. We think the dark sector has always sensed many worlds. But our style of feeling speaks in a very loud, rich way to it." There was a pause. Dorian felt their own breath slow as they watched. A representative from a species made of living crystal structures spoke next. It sounded calm, but there was a thin line of tension under the words. "Humans are young," it said. "Your civilizations are not as old as ours. Your science has only recently joined the council level. Now you claim that a major part of the universe hears you more clearly than it hears us. Do you understand what this means?" Ortiz did not flinch. "It does not make us higher," she said. "Only different. We have many flaws. We have hurt our own world and each other. We are still learning basic patience. But for reasons we did not choose, our emotional noise fits well with the dark sector's way of sensing. We did not ask for this. We only report what our instruments show." Back in the Chilean observatory, Dorian felt a strange mix of pride and worry. To say that humans were special in any cosmic way felt dangerous. It could feed old human egos, old myths of being chosen. But here the choice came from outside. The galaxy itself, or at least its dark half, seemed to listen hardest when humans felt. Later, the council debate shifted. A council scientist from a water-based species shared their own tests. They had placed human volunteers on a remote platform above their ocean world. Nearby, members of their own species took part in similar mood-guided sessions. The shared detectors watched everyone. The data was clear. Humans again made the strongest, cleanest coherence in the microgravity field. Even though they were fewer in number, "Your minds swing wide," the water being said. From joy to fear, from love to anger, in minutes. Our moods move like slow tides. The dark field seems to taste more details in your fast storms. It gets more signal from you over the same slice of time. So humanity, another council member said, may be a kind of key to this living dark. If we wish to send messages into it, or ask if it can answer, humans might be our best channel. Is that correct? Ortiz looked down for a moment, then back up. That is our current belief, she said. The dark sector reacts to many minds, but humans cause the richest, most readable changes. We suggest that humans act as liaisons of the dark sector, not owners of it, not rulers, just translators of warmth between visible species and the living dark. The phrase stuck. Within days, council channels were full of quiet talk about liaisons of the dark sector. Some humans felt a thrill at the title. Others felt the weight of it settle heavily on their shoulders. On Earth, blogs and personal channels began to buzz when the news reached the public. People wrote simple posts about how, all this time, their private feelings might have been touching a hidden mind that wrapped the stars. Some felt watched. Some felt both at once. Dorian watched a short message from their sister, sent from the floating city over the Pacific. "So your weird night work was worth it," she said with a small smile. "You helped show that when I have a bad day, the galaxy feels it a little too. Think about that next time you stare at those numbers." Later that night, Dorian stood alone in the main lab again. The detectors hummed. The data scrolled past. But now, each curve felt like part of a quiet talk between humans and something huge. They thought about why human minds shone this way to the dark. The answer, experts said, was in the noise. Stable species often had gentle mood shifts. Their inner stories were calm and slow. They kept their thoughts in tight, smooth lines. That made their emotional signal easy to live with, but not very rich in information for a system that loved change. Humans, by contrast, rarely held a straight line inside. Their thoughts bounced, twisted, and stacked on top of each other. In a single hour, a person could feel joy at a message from a friend, fear about money, anger about old news, relief about a clear sky, then guilt for snapping at someone. Their inner world was full of sudden turns and strong colors. In signal science, people began to talk about emotional bandwidths. Human minds had high bandwidths. They sent out a huge range of states in short times. They also had emotional contrast. The gap between their highs and lows could be large. The dark sector, with its thin, wide awareness, could notice these strong shifts as neat, sharp patterns in gravity and particle flows. It was like listening to a busy city street from far away. A slow, quiet village might sound like a faint, steady hum. A human city, with cars, voices, music, and sudden shouts, would stand out more. Not because it was better, just because it carried more variety. This was why experts said human minds shone more brightly. To dark matter, their inner storms made strong, changing shapes that the living dark could read as meaning, or at least as something worth following. Once the council accepted this model as likely, the next question came what to do about it. A joint working group formed with members from many species and several human teams. Their goal was simple and huge. Try to speak to the living dark on purpose. They knew they could not form words in dark matter. They did not know if it had anything like language. But they could form patterns. They could keep emotional states steady in groups of people in planned sequences, while detectors watched for matching changes. At first, the tests were small and careful. In Chile, Ortiz asked Dorian to join a pilot group. "Not because you found it first," she said gently, "but because you are good at holding steady attention. And you care about this in a deep way. That matters." The pilot group met in a large, round room buried deep in the rock near the main detectors. The walls were plain. The air was cool. 10 chairs sat in a circle. People from different backgrounds filled them: technicians, scientists, a poet, a former teacher, a nurse. On the wall, a small light glowed, showing when the session was live. Beyond the room, the gravity and neutrino detectors watched carefully. Their feeds went to a separate analysis team in another building, so the group could not influence the data in real time. A calm guide, a middle-aged woman with a soft voice, sat with them. She was not a scientist, but she had long experience running group mindfulness meetings. "Today," she said, "we will all think and feel together about one simple thing: home. We will each bring up our own sense of home, but we will try to line up in time. When I say begin, we all picture and feel home for 10 minutes. When I say shift, we all let the feeling drop away and rest in emptiness. We will do this several times. The detectors will see what the dark field does." Dorian nodded with the others. They closed their eyes when told. At the word begin, they brought up their childhood house, the smell of cooking, the rough feel of the old couch, the way the light had fallen across the worn floor. Then they widened home to include the observatory itself, this mountain, these stars. Warmth rose in their chest. Around them, other people were doing the same in their own minds. The feeling grew stronger as the group settled into it. There was a strange sense of shared warmth, as if many small fires had joined into one gentle blaze. 10 minutes later, at shift, they all let the image of home fade. They let the warmth cool. They tried to rest their minds in simple blankness. Thoughts still came, but they did not follow them. They just noted them and let them drift away. The group repeated this cycle several times. It was tiring in a strange way. but also calm. Dorian felt like a musician holding a long note in a quiet hall. Days later, the results came back. When the group held the feeling of home together, the local microgravity field showed strong, smooth coherence. The background noise became more ordered, as if an unseen hand had brushed it in one direction. The neutrino noise formed paired arcs that matched the timing of the home blocks during the blank periods. The patterns weakened but did not fully vanish, as if the dark sector still hummed slightly from the earlier warmth. "Now look at this," Ortiz said, pulling up another plot. She overlaid the data from the Chile group with a similar group session on the moon, held at the same time by coincidence. Both groups had focused on home, though each had been guided by local leaders, not a shared plan. Yet the shapes in the dark field were very similar. The living dark had reacted in nearly the same style around both worlds. "It seems the dark matter reacts not only to private moods," Ortiz said, "but to shared themes. Maybe it can sense the shape of a story we hold together." The council saw these results and made a choice. They invited humans across the solar system to take part in calm, shared sessions with members of other species present as observers or fellow participants. In some places, humans sat in circles with crystal beings or water bodies, everyone trying to hold simple feelings in step: welcome, safety, respect. In those mixed groups, the detectors showed something subtle but important. When humans led the emotional pattern, the dark field responded more strongly. When other species led and humans followed, the response was still there but slightly weaker. It was as if the living dark tuned in more sharply when the main signal came from human minds. Not everyone loved this. Some council members worried that giving humans a special role would upset old balances. Some humans, too, feared the pressure. "What if we say the wrong thing?" Dorian asked Ortiz, late one night. "What if our storms hurt it? Or confuse it?" Ortiz shook her head. "We do not know if it can be hurt by this," she said. "The dark sector has been here for billions of years. We are like children tapping at the surface of an ocean. Still, your question is good. We should move with care. That is why the council wants shared sessions, not human-only control. We are not priests of the dark. We are part of a larger team." Over time, a new role slowly formed. People started to call certain trained volunteers liaisons of the dark sector. These were humans who had learned to hold clear, steady, emotional patterns while staying calm and kind. They worked with scientists from many species. They led sessions where stories were told not to other people, but to the detectors, and beyond them, to whatever listened in the unseen sea. Dorian did not join the first group of formal liaisons. They were still too shy, but they helped design the rooms and the timing of the sessions. They checked that the detectors were stable, the cables secure, the data paths clean. They also sat in on many practice runs. In those, people told simple stories about life on Earth, growing food again after the climate repairs, building cities that floated above rising seas, singing in crowded night markets, holding loved ones under clear, repaired skies. As they spoke, They let themselves feel fully. The detectors watched, the dark field bent in gentle, repeating ways. For the Galactic Council, this changed how humanity was seen. Humans were no longer just a noisy new members who kept surprising everyone with fast risks and fast fixes. They had become a bridge between the bright, visible side of the cosmos and its wide, dark partner. In council halls, it became common to say, if we want to ask the living dark anything, invite humans to sit with us. Humans were brought into shared labs on distant moons and stations, even where humans had never gone before, not as rulers or stars, but as needed parts of a larger design. Some humans felt pride, some felt fear, some felt simple, quiet duty. Dorian felt all three at once, mixed with a deep satisfaction. The old ache of smallness that had followed them for years now had an answer. Human life did not just flare and fade unseen. It lit up a hidden field that touched every star. It mattered not only to human eyes, but to something spread across the galaxy itself. Still, they knew this was only a beginning. The dark sector had not spoken in clear return. It had only leaned and warmed when they sang certain ways. The living dark was still a mystery, older than any council and vaster than all known space. But humanity now had a place in that mystery, not as the center, not as the top, but as a kind of translator of warmth. Their storms of feeling, once seen as weakness by many, had become a kind of language that the universe could feel. And that, Dorian thought as they walked alone under the cold stars above the observatory, was enough to make every long, lonely night of watching noise feel like part of a much larger story. The first time Dorian took a formal seat as a liaison, the observatory felt both familiar and new. They walked the same, long hall they had crossed for years. The air still smelled faintly of metal and ozone. The neutrino tanks still waited in the deep tunnels below. The gravity arms still rested in their stone beds. Yet, knowing what they knew now, the place felt less like a collection of machines and more like a listening room for the whole sky. A soft light glowed over the doorway to the liaison chamber. Inside, the room was simple, round, quiet, with a single chair in the center and a low ring of cushions along the wall. The walls curved gently, meant to help people feel held but not trapped. Tiny sensors lined the ceiling, tracking heart rate and breath. Beyond the far wall, thick rock and vacuum separated Dorian from the main detectors, but live feeds linked every small change in their body to the larger data stream. Ortiz stood by the entrance, hands in her pockets, face calm. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as I will ever be," Dorian said. They were not alone in this work anymore. Liaison teams now existed on the moon, in orbit, under Antarctic ice, and on several council stations. But tonight, this room, this seat, this session were theirs. Ortiz spoke quietly. "This is not a performance," she said. "You are not here to impress the dark sector. You are here to be honest, to hold clear feelings as you've practiced. The detectors will do their part. Whatever is out there will do its part. Or not. All you can control is your own sincerity." "I know," Dorian said. Their voice shook, only a little. Ortiz nodded toward the chair. "We go live in 10 minutes. Take your time to settle, she left. The door closed with a soft click. Dorian sat. The chair's surface warmed gently under their weight. They placed their hands on their thighs and let their shoulders drop. A tiny tone sounded, letting them know the session would begin soon. In distant rooms, teams from several species watched the feeds. On the moon, a parallel session would start at the same time. On a station near Jupiter, another liaison sat down in their own quiet room. Tonight was not for tests or sharp mood changes. It was for something closer to a conversation, not with words, but with long-held states of feeling. The agreed theme was welcome. Now states of feeling. A calm guide's voice came through a tiny speaker by Dorian's ear. Soft and clear. We begin in 2 minutes, the guide said. You know the pattern. First, we rest in simple awareness for a while. Then we move into welcome and hold it. If other feelings arise, notice them and let them pass. Like clouds, come back to welcome each time, gently. There is no punishment for drifting. You are human. Drifting is part of the signal. Dorian almost smiled at that. They closed their eyes. For a few minutes they just listened to their own breath. In, out, in, out. Thoughts rose and fell. What if the data shows nothing? What if it shows too much? What if they fail? They saw these thoughts and let them go. The tiny tone sounded again. Begin resting state, the guide said. Dorian stayed with their breath. Their body felt heavy in the chair. Muscles loosened. Their heartbeat slowed. The room was silent, except for the soft, distant hum of air systems. It felt like sinking gently into a quiet pool. Far away, the detectors marked this baseline. Gravity lines wavered in normal noise. Neutrino counts followed their usual random patterns. The living dark shifted in its own vast way, mostly beyond any human reach. After 10 minutes, a new tone sounded. Now move into welcome, the guide said softly. Think of what it means to welcome someone or something into your life. Let the feeling form in your chest, your throat, your hands. You may picture faces, places, or simply a warm, open space. Do not force it, let it rise. Dorian thought of the first time Ortiz had trusted them with a complex night shift. The feeling of being seen as capable. They thought of their sister's children running at them with open arms during a rare visit, of the mountains at dawn, always receiving them without judgment when they stepped outside after long nights. Then they widened the sense of welcome. They thought of the living dark itself, resting in and around every star, silent and patient. They pictured it as a vast invisible sea, touching their skin, not heavy, not cold, just present. They let their chest soften, as if opening a door. You are welcome here, they said silently, directing the feeling outward, not as a demand, but as a gift. You are not a stranger. You have been with us since before we were born.